The music shop owner had heard every sob story in the book. But this girl? She didn't beg. She just stood there, clutching the edge of her father's piano like it was the last solid thing left in her world. She was 17. Her voice cracked, but her spine didn't. She wasn't just selling a piano. She was selling the last trace of a man who used to play lullabies after work, who died far too young. She needed money. Fast. The shopkeeper offered her $80. For a Steinway. He thought it was just business. But then, a man she hadn't noticed, quiet, well-dressed, standing in the back, walked forward without a word and sat down at the piano. And when he started to play, the entire store fell silent. What happened next would change her life, and his forever. Sarah Morrison shouldn't have been there. It was Tuesday afternoon. She should have been in chemistry class, sitting behind a chipped desk at Roosevelt High, pretending to care about periodic tables. But instead, she was standing in a dusty corner of Hartman's music shop in downtown Los Angeles, staring at the piano her father had played every night for 10 years. It still smelled like him. That warm, woodsy scent of polished mahogany and aftershave. That was the last thing she had of him. 6 months ago, cancer took her father. Now, cancer was trying to take her mother too. Stage 3. The hospital said treatment would stop by Friday if they didn't pay. Sarah had sold everything she could. Records, books, her dad's watch, even her own Beatles albums. But it wasn't enough. The piano was the last piece. A 1952 Steinway upright. Beautiful, well-kept, and easily worth thousands. But when she wheeled it into the shop, the owner barely looked at it. Just scribbled some numbers on a notepad and said, "I can give you $80. Final offer." Sarah didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stared at him. She'd played this piano since she was 5. Her father had taught her. And now this man was trying to rip it from her hands for the price of a diner shift. She had no leverage, no time, no backup. She was about to say yes, when someone spoke from the back of the store. He hadn't been part of the conversation. For nearly 15 minutes, the man had stayed near the sheet music racks, casually flipping through pages like he had nowhere else to be. Mid-40s, well-dressed, but not flashy. The kind of man you'd forget the moment you looked away. Until he spoke. "Mind if I try it?" The shop owner barely looked up, already irritated. But before he could answer, the man was walking toward the piano. He sat down slowly, adjusted the bench, rested his hands on the keys, and began to play. The first note stopped Sarah cold. She recognized the piece instantly. Claire de Lune, her father's favorite. He used to play it when the house was quiet, late at night, when he thought no one was listening. But this was different. Cleaner, deeper, professional. The music filled the shop, warm and precise, every note landing exactly where it should. The piano came alive, not like an object, but like a voice finally being heard. Sarah forgot where she was, forgot the shop owner, forgot the money. She just stood there, listening. When the man finished, he didn't smile. He didn't ask a price. He simply ran his hand along the wood, pressed a few keys, and nodded to himself. "This is a beautiful instrument," he said quietly. Then he looked at Sarah. "And it's worth far more than $80. And that's when the shop owner's face changed. The shop owner laughed nervously. He tried to brush it off. Said something about opinions, about how markets change, about how old pianos aren't what they used to be. The man didn't argue. He stood up from the bench, straightened his jacket, and walked over to Sarah. Up close, his voice was calm, steady in a way that made you listen. "That piano is a 1952 Steinway," he said. "Maintained by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The action is perfect. The soundboard is clean. No cracks. No warping." Sarah's breath caught. "It's worth at least $3,500, he continued. "Maybe $4,000 to the right buyer." The color drained from the shop owner's face. Then the man turned back to Sarah and held out his hand. "I'm Dean Martin." The name landed like a dropped glass. Sarah just stared at him. That Dean Martin. The man whose voice her father used to play on Sunday mornings. The man on her mother's favorite records. Standing there in a quiet music shop like it was nothing. Dean glanced at the piano, then back at her. "I'd like to buy it." She opened her mouth, but no words came out. "How much do you need?" he asked gently. Sarah didn't know why she answered. Maybe because she was exhausted. Maybe because his voice didn't feel dangerous. Maybe because for the first time all day, someone was actually listening. "3,000, she said. "By Friday." Dean didn't hesitate. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a checkbook, and started writing. When he handed it to her, Sarah's hands began to shake. The amount wasn't $3,000. It was $5,000, and Dean Martin wasn't finished yet. Sarah was still staring at the check when Dean turned to the shop owner. "You're a witness," he said. "I just purchased this Steinway for $2,000. Write up a receipt." The shop owner sputtered. "You can't just—" "I can," Dean said, calm as ever. "And I did. Write it up." There was no shouting, no threats, just a quiet certainty in Dean's voice that made it clear this was not up for debate. The receipt was written, signed. The piano, legally, now belonged to Dean Martin. Then he turned back to Sarah. "Now," he said, "here's what's going to happen." She braced herself, not knowing what was coming next. "I need a place to store this piano," Dean continued. "I live in Los Angeles, but I travel constantly. Vegas, New York, film sets. I can't have it sitting in an empty house." Sarah blinked. "You want me to store it?" "That's right," he said. "And while it's there, you should play it. Often." She stared at him, unsure if she was hearing correctly. "Pianos need to be played," Dean said softly. "Your father knew that. That's why this one still sings. He didn't just own it. He loved it. That's what kept it alive." Her hands went to her mouth. She could feel the tears threatening again, but this time it wasn't from fear or exhaustion. It was something else, something warmer. Dean wasn't buying the piano. He was giving it back. But then he said one more thing, and it made Sarah's knees nearly buckle. "Mr. Martin," Sarah whispered, still stunned. "Why are you doing this?" Dean looked at her for a long moment. Not with pity, not with some Hollywood shine, just quiet understanding. "Because 20 years ago," he said, "I was broke in New York. Just a kid, singing in smoky nightclubs, living off tips and bar food." He paused, the weight of memory settling behind his eyes. "I got sick, real sick. Appendicitis. Emergency surgery. No insurance, no money, nothing." Sarah listened, eyes wide. "I was lying in a hospital bed thinking I was going to die because I couldn't pay." He looked away for a second, gathering himself. "And then this guy, another performer, trumpet player I barely knew, he shows up, pays my hospital bill, $1,200. Money he didn't have. I told him I'd pay him back." Dean smiled, just barely. He said, "Don't pay me back. Just do the same for someone else when you can." He looked back at Sarah. "And now I can." That was it. No speech. No spotlight. Just a man returning a kindness that had once saved his life. Dean reached into his pocket again and handed Sarah the signed receipt for the piano. "This belongs to me now," he said. "But it's staying at your house, forever, if you want it." Sarah clutched it in her hands, barely able to breathe. Dean's voice lowered one final time. "Because that's what your father would have wanted." Dean Martin walked out of the music shop without another word. The bell above the door jingled once. Then the room fell silent. Harold Hartman, the owner of the shop, stood frozen behind his counter. For 18 years, he and Oppos, Dean made a living buying low and selling high. It wasn't personal. It was just business. He told himself that every day. Some people cried. Some begged. He always stayed detached. But watching Dean Martin write that check, watching him give Sarah back the piano, the money, the dignity, something cracked inside Harold. For the first time in years, he felt it. Shame. He went home that night and told his wife the story. Word for word. No excuses. When he finished, she looked at him for a long time. "So," she said, "what are you going to do?" "I stood there like an idiot," Harold muttered. "No," she said softly. "You're going to find that girl, and you're going to make it right." He shook his head. "That's $3,900. That's out of our savings." His wife didn't flinch. "We have enough." "She doesn't." He didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. All he saw when he closed his eyes was Sarah's face, and Dean Martin calmly refusing to let him win. The next morning, Harold drove to Echo Park and knocked on Sarah's door. She answered cautiously, unsure what to expect. "I need to give you something," he said. He handed her an envelope. Inside was a check for $3,900, the difference between his offer and what the piano was truly worth. "I was going to cheat you," he admitted. "Dean Martin stopped me. But that's not enough. I have to do more than just not steal. I have to make it right." Sarah stared at the check like it didn't make sense. "Why?" Harold looked down. "Because yesterday I saw the kind of man I want to be. I'm not him yet. But maybe this is a start." Sarah's mother lived. The $5,000 from Dean Martin covered the hospital's demands. And the $3,900 from Hartman? It paid for the follow-up treatments, and 3 more months of care. Catherine Morrison beat cancer. Sarah graduated from Roosevelt High in the spring of 1966. She'd planned to skip college, get a job, help her mother pay the bills. But Catherine refused. "Your father would want you to go," she said. "We'll figure it out." Sarah enrolled at UCLA and majored in music education. She didn't buy a new piano. She didn't have to. Dean Martin's Steinway, her father's Steinway, still sat in the living room, waiting for her hands. She played it every day, and when she graduated, she began to teach. For the next 40 years, Sarah Morrison gave piano lessons in a small home studio in Los Angeles. She never turned a student away. "Pay me when you can," she'd say. "Or don't pay me at all. Just play." She taught over 1,200 students. Dozens went on to become professional musicians. Hundreds more simply found joy in the music. And with every lesson, Sarah shared the story. She told them about her father and the piano, about the music shop, about the man who tried to take everything from her, and the man who gave it all back. Dean Martin never called, never wrote. He didn't need to. His gesture had already echoed louder than any song he'd ever sung. When Sarah passed away in 2018 at the age of 70, her obituary mentioned 2 things: that she had been a beloved piano teacher for 4 decades, and that she had played the same 1952 Steinway her entire life. When Sarah died, she didn't leave the Steinway to a museum. She didn't auction it or lock it away. She left it to a young woman from South Central Los Angeles, a student who had shown up every week for lessons, even though she couldn't afford them. Sarah never asked for payment. In her will, Sarah wrote just one line about the piano: "Play it the way I taught you. And when you're done, pass it on to someone else who needs it." Because that's what Dean Martin had taught her. That the most valuable things in life aren't meant to be sold. They're meant to be shared. A father's love, a stranger's kindness, a second chance, a piano that never stopped playing. And maybe that's why, all those years ago, when Dean Martin reached the door of that little music shop and turned back one last time, he said something that would echo for decades. "Your father was right. That is the most beautiful piano in the world. Not because of what it was made of, but because of who loved it."